Hello, I'm Theodore Bouloukos here in New York at Paul Rogers' 9W Gallery with my friend and a painter whom I've admired for quite some time, Randall Stoltzfus. Randall is part of a group show here at Paul Rogers, and I was thrilled to see him back in New York, though he lives here, showing again. He shows all over the country, and I was enchanted when I saw that he was here in Chelsea. And we're meeting with him today and getting to talk a bit about these paintings that have enthralled me since I first saw them some 7 years ago. What were you thinking when you did this?
Well, I think probably thinking about light is the main thing with this piece. That's one of the tensions is between light and dark, and the business of how sometimes in order to have something be really luminous, you need a lot of dark because otherwise there's no contrast.
Right.
So yeah, spent a lot of time working with materials to try to expand the optical range of the piece. So, in this, there's not only the whitest white that I can throw at it, but also, well, that's the reason for some of the additions, like it's a little bit of gold leaf.
Yeah, which is interesting because this palette has a lot more reds in it than I've seen in some of your other paintings.
You want me to talk about red?
Sure.
Red's tricky. I don't. Yeah, this is actually really scary stuff to me. The red, because have you ever noticed? I think that one thing that's really interesting about us is that physically we see differently. Yeah. I mean, how do you know that? There's no way for me to know that you see a color the same way I do. Right. And I for sure have had the experience of people like going, yeah, but why'd you put that piece of red right there? And it's
you said it's red?
It's something different to me than it is to you. That's for sure. And that's the way these paintings work. I think when they're successful, there's that business of how we see differently means that you get to see something different than I do, and that can be good.
Now, your paintings are multi-layered. Do you have a strategy for sitting before a canvas and deciding what to put on?
Strategy. Probably the clearest strategy is to be really patient. There's a lot of layers, like you said, and I try, whether or not this is wise or an efficient thing to do, I try to leave room for the painting to be something that I didn't expect. So I'll work on a lot of things at once, and I'll put them aside and then come back to them. I know I'm not the only person that works that way, but I think it's rarer and rarer these days because it does take a lot of patience. But hopefully the result is something that is, it's possible for it to unfold unexpectedly for you if you give it some time. Certainly I've given it some time and tried to wait for it to surprise me. So it's oil paint, and that's important a couple different ways. One of the things is, about oil paint, right? It oxidizes as it dries, which is literally it's smoldering, and I love that you're making this thing that is light reflective. It's actually in a very subtle way burning, and so as they dry. That process of going back and forth gives me a chance to see what happens as the paint settles, as it dries, as it smolders. And so it is going to be a little bit different when I look at it next. I'm going to be different too, and that's maybe the most important thing because, the idea is that the paintings are not going anywhere. They're not going to fade quickly like a photograph might, or an inkjet print, but you're going to change, and so it's going to be different.
Where do you draw a lot of your ideas from? I mean, your work is very moody and a little melancholic too. Is there an inner sadness to Randall that we see manifest in these works?
Well, I don't know about sadness, but I think that part of that melancholy is something that is just inherent in landscape and my experience of the landscape. I grew up in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, which is a pretty nice landscape, and it's funny, since moving into this very urban environment, I think that it has more and more informed what I make.
Do you find yourself, given the distance, able to sort of render it differently than if you were living and working among the landscape itself?
Yeah, sure, it's different. There's a filter there that is about distance, and I suppose that might be part of where the melancholic sense comes from. You know, there's a thing about the way the paintings work that has to do with a filter of a sort, right? That there's a lot of texture and there's a deep space. So there you have to get past the texture to see into the space. And I think for me that it is a metaphor that works for my remembering this, you know, the place that I come from.
Has your palette changed over the years?
I think you're probably right that that's one of the evolutions in the work.
Are you working with a smaller canvas too? I mean, some of the other ones are quite large. Or the bigger paintings that I've seen, they're really, really large.
Yeah.
What made you go? What made you downsize?
New York City.
Oh, okay.
No, and it's also I have a love-hate relationship with small paintings.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
What's that about?
Well, they're sort of wonderful, right? There's this thing about scale. You talked before about the work having a figurative a relationship with figuration, and I think at this point these paintings have the relationship with figuration is actually kind of abstract, very physical, and with small paintings. If a painting is very small, right, the only way to really see into it is to get it gets into your head space, and it fills your visual field because you get close to it, which is lovely, and it can be really powerful. Big paintings, they're totally fun because you can walk into them. Yeah. And
I felt that way with those two canvases that you showed about, I guess, 4 years ago, perhaps. It was at Philip Morris or one of those big companies.
The Durst.
It was the Durst organization, right. And they were so enveloping because you literally could walk into these landscapes. I mean, but they were really haunting at the same time. And your work has a very, very ominous, very haunting quality that, you know, it's fun to be sort of scared in front of you.
Yeah, it is, and I think that's an American idea about the landscape too. Don't you? Like, I love, what's the guy in Sleepy Hollow?
Rip Van Winkle.
Well, no, and the Headless Horseman.
Oh, yes, of course, yes.
Ichabod
Crane, yes.
Yeah, I think that's something that's, it's a very American idea about the landscape, isn't it? I mean, those are...
Well, I guess about pioneering the unknown, you know, and forging ahead and westward ho and...
We had
or is that simply some prostitute in L.A.?
I had a fun conversation visiting California this past summer.
Now that's a great title for either a book or a painting. Visiting California.
Visiting California is it's a big subject, especially for a country boy from the East like me.
Right.
But
with Amish roots, we might add.
With Amish roots.
I'm sorry, I have to mention that.
There are very few of those in California. Well, we can talk about that, or we can talk about ghosts in California. Which way do you want to go?
Which I'm pretty flexible.
Well, let's start with so this trip to California, right? The thing that was fascinating to me is my companion and I both agreed that there's a different sort of ghost in the California landscape than there is in the eastern one. Right, because
they were what 49ers or gold diggers or
have you been a little bit in the redwood forest? Oh, you should go.
No.
It's fantastic, and there isn't any room for human ghosts there. The ghosts are like from prehistory or something. They're geographic ghosts. It's a haunted landscape, but it's haunted on like a God scale, as opposed to the landscape that I grew up in, which was very literally haunted with Confederate and Union soldiers. You know, it has a different kind of, a different scale and a different mythological sense. I don't know. But so now.
So we were in California, and you were saying that it was it's this very apparitional space.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah. Apparitional
I tried.
space. That's beautiful. Can I use that as the title of a painting?
Please.
Can we use it for that one? No.
we could use it
Okay.
for that one,
Cool. Yeah, I like
it
that.
would be my contribution.
We definitely
Yeah.
got something out of the
We're a good
interview. There we go.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, as long as I don't have to pay you.
No, not at all. Are you kidding? Your company is more than compensation.
It's very kind of you.
Well, please. Then there was the other conversation. You were saying we could talk about ghosts in California or the Amish roots,
Yeah.
right?
Ghostly ancestors.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But you didn't actually, to let the audience know, you come from you have Amish ancestry, but you weren't raised Amish.
Right. It gets a little confusing.
But it certainly influenced your.
Sure. My
sensibility.
grandfather was an Amish deacon, and my parents. I was raised in the Mennonite church, which sure there's a sensibility there. There's no question.